Hey, thanks for clicking on the video. Today we're looking at episode Revenant's most surprising meta exotic, or at least it was to me. I mean, who knew that with one simple sandbox update and a good artifact, Diris would become a go-to option for pretty much all of the content in the game. I'm talking nutty DPS rotations to simply being a fantastic option for GMs and similar in-game content. So in this video, we're going to cover everything that's happened to Diris and why you may actually want to break this exotic out now and especially in the future. Starting with the most important piece first, we have the exotic itself. We have the main perk, Corrupted Nucleosynthesis, that reads, this weapon enrages when dealing or taking sustained damage, gaining increased rate of fire while enraged. So looking at this and its base performance too, starting with the latter, this is just a hive boomer. You've got no mag and it shoots out an arc projectile in a fairly flat trajectory. Damage wise, we're looking at these two numbers, which add up to 32,996. And then for a bit of reference, Mountaintop, our favorite, deals 52,557 in one shot with these two numbers. But the trade-off with Diris is that it fires much faster. It actually fires at variable speed depending on this meter found next to your reticle. This is the enrage meter that fills as you deal or take damage, giving you massively increased fire rate. You can also pop one shot off straight at your feet to get instant max enrage, which is just a little tip. But back to real damage values, we have its second exotic perk, Loyal Moths, which create those arc moths you might have already seen. The second perk reads, final blows and rapid direct hits with this weapon create a loyal moth. The moth will seek out nearby targets and detonate, damaging and blinding them. Now looking at that, upon 2 direct hits, a moth will spawn that deals 25,332 damage. So that moth is only slightly less than a full shot, giving us a very real and tangible boost to our damage output when we actually get that moth to spawn. We also get this moth to spawn on kills, and this moth will often outright kill whatever it hits. So this secondary perk actually helps with sustained damage and ad clear on Diris. But then we have the secondary effect of the moths, where not only will they damage their targets, they also cause arc blind, which means yes, Diris can stun unstops with 0 investment. This extra effect is also very important for the artifact, but more on that in just a second. The last thing to touch on is the weapon's catalyst, which gives it the perk Berserk Rush that reads, weapon enrages faster while amplified. Final blows with this weapon make you amplified. It's nothing too important, but you can get amplified without any arc investment thanks to the catalyst. It also just makes Diris feel a little bit better as it speeds up our enrage. Granted, at base, it's already pretty quick. But now before we dive into how and where we should be abusing this GL, and the big things here were the buffs that launched with episode Revenant and episode Revenant's artifact. Starting with the buffs, as this increased our baseline performance. Previously, Diris was a very mid pick for most players. It was unintuitive, difficult to control, and was just kind of weak. But with Revenant, we got an increase in damage by 33%, a slew of quality of life updates, and the new ability to spawn moths from 2 direct hits, giving us some extra lethality on sustained damage and giving it some more leeway into DPS rotations. Those changes were frankly massive for Diris and anyone looking to use it. A lot of what makes it so great right now comes from the artifact, which we'll cover again in just a second. But before we move on to that and get caught up in the now, Diris is genuinely a great choice moving forward as well. Next episode, next DLC, Diris is still going to put out good damage, it's going to have good arc synergy, and all around, it's not going to be a throw, which it totally used to be. But now finally moving into the artifact, what are we looking at? Well, the big ones to immediately snap to are Concussive Reload and Arc Compounding. Concussive Reload reads, using a grenade launcher to damage a boss, damage a champion, or break a combatant's shields, weakens them. Now, that's a 15% debuff that you can go around spamming at bosses or champs as the most common recipients. If you've played it all this episode, I'm sure you've been using this mod already. Free weaken on weapon hits is far too good to pass up. And Diris here is a premier source of grenade damage. You've got no reloads, there's no hassle, even the moths count as damage for this perk. Concussive Reload just makes Diris a go-to option for spamming an enemy, or again, a perfect addition to a DPS rotation. But that's not where the damage increases end. As with Act 2, we got Arc Compounding, which reads, arc sources deal increased damage to blind targets. It's such an easy layup, it almost feels like it was made for Diris. If you forgot from just a moment ago, Diris has intrinsic arc blind coming from its moths, and Diris is arc damage. You don't even need to swap weapons to get both a 15% weaken and a bespoke 15% increase from arc compounding. That means in just 2 shots, so you can spawn your Moth, you're getting a 32.25% increase in damage. And that's without Radiant or Surges or anything like that. But then to top all of that off, we also have Overload GL, which works with Diris, giving it the ability to stun both champs by itself. Overloads from the projectile, unstops from the Moth. But now that we've looked at Diris at base and why it's now just seeing a rise in popularity, how are we using it? Well, the 3 avenues I see are for boss DPS, in-game running and gunning inside of content like GMs, Lost Sectors, and Expert Onslaught / Tomb of Elders, and then also what my hunters can do with it. Starting with DPS, I highly recommend watching either Llama's or Dato's video in the process, but you can essentially stack Diris with the new Bittersweet GL and the Chill Clip Weapon alongside a ton of artifact mods to get so many stacking percents of damage that you begin to put out the highest DPS in the game. If you slap on Sanguine Alchemy, you actually do better damage over an encounter than people rocking the same loadout with Golden Gun or a similar damage super. It's just crazy. And there's a reason why my friends have put out dedicated videos on this topic. So I highly encourage you to check those out from the description below if you're interested in out DPSing your fire team. But for the more simple stuff, GMs and more ad dense / champion dense content, in these activities, you barely need to use anything but Diris. If it's overloads and unstops, just spam the GL. You'll stun and weaken champs and you can just continuously lay on the trigger to dispatch them. Or you can get fancy and swap over to a different weapon to finish them off, with the best option being an arc heavy like Bittersweet, kind of like a pseudo DPS rotation. There's genuinely just not an activity out there where Diris doesn't excel right now. But then I also mentioned that my hunters can exclusively optimize this exotic thanks to the hidden synergy with Mothkeeper's Wraps. Now, while definitely unnecessary, if you're looking for an exotic to run, this exotic will cause a second Moth to spawn whenever Diris spawns its own. This new Void Moth will seek to you or allies and give you a Void Overshield. It also gives you 2 charges of a unique Moth Grenade, which also spawns 1 Arc and 1 Void Moth, just like Diris does now. Nothing else really happens, but if you want to build into Diris even more than with the artifact, you can run these gauntlets for a pretty damn good build. Good enough that I'll likely make a build video about them in the new year. But to close us out, Diris is absolutely fantastic now. Whether you're a raider or just grinding out some loot in GMs and Revenant activities, try it out. And with that, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you so much for getting this far into the video. Your viewership means a ton, especially if you've come by the streams, whether it's on YouTube or Twitch, and said hi while I played Destiny 1. I appreciate it a lot. Let me know down below if you've used Diris or what your opinions are on this frankly very unique GL. And if you want to support me and support the channel, a like, a comment, a subscription goes a very long way. If you want to support me and support the channel, but you can't think of a comment down below Diris. And with that, as usual, I hope you are having a great day, and I hope to see you around.